Hello everybody, thank you for watching my unit plan showcase for my unit plan on photosynthesis. As you can see right now I have pulled up my homepage, but before I get into what's on this page, I want to refer to this link right here, and that is my unit plan template. Now as you can see, I've embedded my unit plan template. I won't get into too much detail about what I included on here because everything that you see here is reflected in my website. So I'm going to be talking about this indirectly as I go through my website. So going back to my homepage, my unit plan summary is in this unit plan for 9th grade biology. So my student population is 9th grade. Students will explore the biological process of photosynthesis. The different lessons and assessments in this unit are designed for students to understand why photosynthesis is a complex process needed for all living things. Students will learn about what types of organisms perform photosynthesis and where in plants photosynthesis occurs. Overall, from this unit, students will be knowledgeable about the two reactions of photosynthesis, light-dependent and light-independent reactions, and know the reactants and products of each reaction. Throughout the unit, students will use the internet to enhance understanding of how plants use energy from sunlight to synthesize carbohydrate molecules. And my big ideas I've included on here as well. And the biggest idea by far is that photosynthesis is a process where light energy is converted into chemical energy, and it's important for all living things. In addition to that, I have plants, bacteria, and algae or autotrophs that use photosynthesis. Photosynthesis occurs in an organelle unique to plants called chloroplasts. Photosynthesis occurs in two reactions, light-dependent and light-independent reactions, and the last two big ideas are referring to the reactants and products of each of those reactants. So sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide are essential for photosynthesis to occur. Those are the reactants. And lastly, oxygen and carbohydrate molecules are the two major products of photosynthesis. So those are obviously the products. And I included this picture because I thought it nicely summarized the big ideas, and ideally by the end of this unit, students will know exactly what's going on in this figure. So moving on to my student learning objectives, I've included 7 of them, in which students will be able to evaluate why photosynthesis is important to energy and material flow for life on Earth. They'll be able to distinguish between autotrophic, heterotrophic nutrition. They'll be able to describe the structure of chloroplasts, listing all membranes and compartments. Be able to identify the locations of light-dependent and light-independent reactions within a chloroplast. They'll be able to recite the reactants and products for each reaction of photosynthesis. They'll be able to state the Balanced equation for photosynthesis and explain the relationship between cellular respiration and photosynthesis. Now this process right here, cellular respiration, this is another biological process that I am not going to talk about in my unit plan, but it is closely linked to photosynthesis, and it's in my unit. I'm assuming that students have already learned about cellular respiration. And lastly, on my homepage, I talk about the different science standards that this unit aligns with. Now, in 2013, the state of California adopted what's called the Next Generation Science Standards. So these are fairly new, but I've included 2 of them in my unit, and those are HSLS1 for molecules, organisms, structures, and processes, and HSLS2, ecosystems, interactions, energy, and dynamics. And the two that correspond with those are HSLS15. Students who demonstrate understanding can use a model to illustrate how photosynthesis transforms light energy into stored chemical energy, and HSLS25, where students who demonstrate understanding can develop a model to illustrate the role of photosynthesis and cellular respiration in the cycling of carbon among the biosphere, atmosphere, hydrosphere, and geosphere. So those are the content standards for my unit plan. Okay, so moving forward, on my website, I have included a link where it'll take you to the different assessments for my lesson plan. I have 3 different types. I have entry-level, formative, and summative, which I've included for students to look over. And let me scroll down to my assessment map. So as you can see, I have mapped out all the different assessments that I want students to complete, and they are in chronological order. So starting with my entry-level assessment, I'm going to have students brainstorm. It's going to be very informal. They're going to answer a question that I'm going to recite to them verbally, and that is, where does oxygen come from? The idea behind this is just to get students critically thinking about why this process is important for life on Earth. And moving forward with that, I have flashcards that I'm going to have students look at on Quizlet. Quizlet is a virtual flashcard database where I'm going to be making the flashcard set, and students are going to be referring to those cards, and it's going to help them build vocabulary. And they can also identify any words that they're not comfortable with. We can talk about those as a class as well. In my formative assessments, I've also included clicker questions. Now, some of you may be asking, what is a clicker question? And basically, those are multiple choice true and false questions that I've created, and students are going to answer on personal response systems. So they're going to be able to kind of like key in their answer as I'm going through it on the PowerPoint. I've also included graphic organizers. That's going to be completed in lesson 3. And critical thinking questions where students are again thinking more about the impact of photosynthesis, and that's where I'm going to tie in cellular respiration. Lastly, my unit plan is going to conclude with my 2 summative assessments, and where I have a presentation plan, and finally ending the unit with an exam. I've included my formative assessment, my clicker questions, so you can kind of see an example of what that's going to look like. So students are going to answer these questions with their response systems, and they're going to get instant feedback. So as soon as we finish this little quiz that I have for them, they're going to be able to see which ones they got wrong, and they're also going to see questions that it's going to allow me to see questions that were frequently missed, so we can talk about that as a class. And I've also have my summative assessment. I have my presentation guide and the rubric for students to refer to. They can also download it if they want their own copy. But basically in this presentation, students, they're going to be modeling to me their demonstration, their knowledge of photosynthesis, and they're going to be doing that directly and indirectly because they're going to have to do research about a plant of their choice, and they're going to have to talk about the site of photosynthesis on their own plant that they've researched, and also talk about why their plant is important for their environment. So it's tying in underlying themes that we've talked about and applying them to a real life example. And with that, I've also included a presentation rubric to kind of guide students into what exactly I'm looking for. So I'm looking for how they deliver it, the organization of the presentation, of course the content. I'm going to make sure that they follow directions with the time limit, and also how well they listen to others present. So I've included all that in the rubric, and that's what they're going to be graded on for their presentation. And those are my assessments. So moving on to my lessons. Lesson 1 is my teacher lecture. This is going to be accompanied with guided notes, which you can see I've embedded as well, and again, students can download their own if they wish. So my lecture has 13 slides. Before I get into the content of my lecture, I just want to have this check for understanding so students know what information they need to recall that's going to help them with what they're going to be, the new information that they're going to learn. So for example, I have included that we already know information about trophic levels. So when I say the word autotroph, I'm assuming students already know what this is, and when I refer to it in this lecture, it's just merely for review and connectivity to how it relates to photosynthesis. So with my lecture, I've also included a driving question, which I hope students will be able to answer by the end of the lecture. And as I move on through it, you can see I've denoted things that are going to be discussed as a class, in addition to questions that I want students to think, pair, share. Overall, I hope with this information, students will be able to answer that driving question, how photosynthesis occurs. I've included different tables that help them learn more about the structure of chloroplasts, so this is where photosynthesis occurs. And I've condensed the steps. Now, photosynthesis can be a complex process, so I've condensed and made it age appropriate to the best of my ability. And to supplement this, I've included a YouTube video for students to watch, because I know this is very conceptual, and I feel that it helps to have a video to look at exactly what's going on. So that is that. And as you can see, I do conclude the lecture answering the driving question of how does photosynthesis happen. Now with this lecture, I do have my guided notes, which consists of fill in the blanks and a table that helps students organize their information. So again, more fill in the blanks, and they'll have to complete summaries, and again, fill out this table. This one's really important because it nicely summarizes a big chunk of the important information that students will need to create a model of photosynthesis. And then lastly, I have a spot for them to respond to that driving question so they can summarize that nicely in their own words. And that's lesson 1. Lesson 2 is my Weber size. Students will be working with a computer to visit the 3 links that I've included on this Weber size. They are there. Now students will have to complete the activities on those websites to answer these questions. So that's going to be pretty engaging for them. Again, it's just building on information about photosynthesis. And moving on to lesson 3, this is my graphic organizer. So for my graphic organizer, I'm going to have students build a concept map using the website Poplet, and I've included the learning objectives that this aligns with. Basically, students are going to create a concept map of photosynthesis. It is pretty straightforward, but I've included questions for students to consider when they're building their maps. Now, I'm not looking for students to answer these questions directly, but rather it just kind of gives them a start of what to be thinking about to help them build their maps. I've also included resources to help them build their maps because I know in my lecture I don't talk in depth a lot about the structure of leaves, but I think it's important for photosynthesis, so I've included some additional links to help them build their concept maps. I personally use these websites and I found that they're very helpful, so I included those for students. I've also included just a very brief information about using Poplet, and I have my requirements, and I've followed that up with an example of what I would give in a presentation, and I have included my scoring guide. And basically I'm just looking to see that all students contribute equally. They are going to be working in groups to complete this, so I'm just making sure that everybody did their fair share. I'm looking to see that they have visual aids and that the information is appropriate for their age level. I don't want to see a whole bunch of facts that have just been copied and pasted. I want to see that students really did think about it. And this is just the rubric. It's pretty straightforward, but that's what I'm going to be looking for when I grade their concept maps. So that is what's planned for lesson 3. Now I have included a bunch of unit plan resources for students to refer back to. I've included this chunk on videos because I find that videos help me learn photosynthesis the most, but I've included some different ones for them to look through, as well as some different games that they can do to help them review for their unit exam, as well as more links on general information of photosynthesis. Now lastly, I already covered my unit plan template, but I also have a link that's going to take students to my teacher site, and it's universal, so from my teacher site students can go back to my unit plan and it'll take you right back to the homepage. And that pretty much sums up my unit plan. So thank you for watching. I appreciate your time, and that's it.